I'm joined now by NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is quite the day, quite unexpected. What is the mood and attitude down there now? Are people shocked? Look, I remember when the former president was in the hospital and there were crowds of people, you know, wearing MAGA clothing and flag underwear and everything else like that, running around praying for him. Is that the scene that we see surrounding Mar-a-Lago at this point, or are people still in shock?
I think it's a good question what's happening in Mar-a-Lago right now. We're actually just outside of Milwaukee right now because there's a major primary happening here. Trump was here over the weekend in the greater Milwaukee area here backing Tim Michels, who is one of these election-denying candidates who is running for governor and could have his hands on the certification process in 2024. And I think that that's where all of this hits here. I'm reaching out to multiple Trump sources here right now. I am told by a source familiar that the former president is currently in New York City. The exact location I do not have at this time here. He and his family have not been in Mar-a-Lago over the course of this summer. They have been staying in Bedminster. He did fly back to New Jersey this weekend after attending CPAC in Dallas. But then I know at some point here since then, he made his way to New York City, where he is at right now. I mean, essentially, the former president was breaking this news himself here. And I think to your question, it's providing the context of this moment here. Donald Trump, for years, has been setting up an American voting population to question the legitimacy of its investigation agencies. And he has successfully gotten elected leaders to echo those reservations and the suggestions that the deep state was out to get him. You know, just take Wyoming. Next Tuesday is Liz Cheney's primary against Trump-backed Harriet Hageman. And I was in Wyoming in May when the former president was there, and Harriet Hageman stood on stage next to him and said, "Do not trust the FBI, the CIA, the NSA." So when you are looking at where millions of Americans have been getting their news and the sources in which they trust, at the top of it for so many is the former president. There is a distrust in this. And so what you just saw the former president lay out in this lengthy statement, he called it an unannounced raid. Of course, it was approved by a judge here. And ultimately, there was probable cause for the judge to grant this search warrant of the former president's residency here. And yet at the same time, you have seen the former president call this a witch hunt. He has sown distrust in the media. He has sown distrust in the government. He has sown distrust in our elections here. And the question that we have over these next 3 months is, where does the American electorate stand? Will they follow the lead of this former president? Will you see Republican leaders up on Capitol Hill step away from the former president and say, maybe we should take a moment to see what the Department of Justice has come up with? Again, we don't know if the former president himself is the subject of this investigation. We do not know what they were looking for here. That is important context to all of this. At the same time, Donald Trump has made himself a political martyr and has suggested that he is going to run for president again as such here in order to save America, in his words, from the radical left. This is a political moment as much as it is an investigatory one in the eyes of Donald Trump.
Thanks, Vaughn Hilliard, Dana Milbank, and Kurt Bardella. Joining me now is Charlie Sykes, editor-at-large of The Bulwark and an MSNBC contributor, and NBC national political reporter Mark Caputo. Charlie, I'll begin with you. This is significant, right? The former president of the United States, the FBI has raided his home. We don't know how long they're going to be there. Trump himself appears to have broken the news by making the announcement one way or another. How is this resonating, or how do you think this is going to resonate over the next 24 hours within the Republican Party? We know that MAGA world's immediate response is going to be, this is terrible, this is the deep state, et cetera, et cetera. But many other Republicans, this is now a different line. The FBI is now in his home. This is a home that they've been to. They may be nervous one way or another. Ron DeSantis may be licking his lips and saying, this is exactly what I wanted. How is this affecting the sort of non-cult members of the Republican Party?
Well, it's too fresh, but I would underline everything that Vaughn Hilliard just said. I mean, do not underestimate, how much effort Donald Trump has has gone to sow distrust in the FBI to set up this particular moment. So this will unleash an absolute firestorm. My guess is that many elected Republicans will observe a strategic silence. They will keep their heads down. They won't speak out about it. Because that's their normal pattern. But you know that MAGA world is going to be absolutely on fire. And the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, had to know this. The FBI had to know this. The federal judge or the federal magistrate had to know that they were pulling the trigger on this. I think one of your previous guests described this as crossing the Rubicon. This is going to have, you can't come back from an unannounced raid of the president's, former president's home. So clearly, they felt that there was something that was important enough for them to get right now. So everything has escalated dramatically. I think a lot of people have wondered, would there be an indictment? This does not signal that there will be an immediate indictment, but it certainly indicates that the FBI, the Justice Department, and a federal judge think that there was sufficient reason to go into Mar-a-Lago. So in terms of the Republican reaction, I think you watch for silence from the usual suspects and absolute en fuego outrage from Trump's inner circle.
Mark, let's take a look at the Democratic side of this. So, again, Merrick Garland, the FBI, the DOJ have been adamant, to the frustration, really, of quite a few Democrats, have been adamant about being apolitical in their investigations. Now, they obviously can't convince cultists that they're apolitical because Donald Trump and his minions have always said that they're out to get them. But how do you think this is being perceived, or what's it likely to be perceived by national Democrats? Will they, too, as Charlie suggested, observe sort of silence and say, hey, look, we didn't have anything to do with this. We'll see where the evidence takes us. Do you think that perhaps more progressive Democrats will say, hey, it's about time? How do you think the national messaging for the Democrats is going to be as this news is broken over the next 24 hours?
Well, if you look at Twitter, I think the national Democratic reaction is hallelujah. Now, whether that bears out, whether that continues on, we'll see. I think your smarter Democrats, especially President Biden, can be incredibly measured. Donald Trump is not going to be measured about this. Charlie's right about the reaction. I have talked to some DeSantis world folks. Their position is, look, you better have a lot of evidence before you raid a former president's place. So they're just kind of focusing on the process of it. They're not going to step in this one either. As you pointed out, Merrick Garland is just a very cautious prosecutor. In the end, we have to remember this, is that if they do make a criminal case, you have to have a criminal case where you have enough evidence where you can think you can convict the person. So that's a high bar to reach. You got to get the evidence to do it first. And then they have to decide, how are we going to impanel a jury? This is a long, complicated process. We're in completely uncharted waters, unmapped territory. Donald Trump pointed out this has never happened to a former president. Well, yeah, that's true. But a former president has also never incited a mob that wound up ransacking the Capitol and almost prevented Congress from doing its job to certify a presidential election he lost. So that's different as well. He also didn't have the National Archives asking the FBI, hey, can you investigate this matter? Because this guy walked away with a bunch of boxes of documents that were supposed to be left here. Incidentally, those boxes of documents were at Mar-a-Lago. Do we know exactly what this federal investigation is about? No. And there's two potential federal ones that we know off the bat, and we don't know everything that's going on in the Department of Justice anyway.